California dream is as good as dead, according to journalist and author Susan Crabtree. In the forthcoming book, Fool's Gold, the radicals, con artists, and traitors who killed the California dream and now threaten us all, Crabtree points to the mounting crises that have plagued the Golden State for years, from devastating wildfires, skyrocketing homelessness, ever-increasing drug-related deaths, to smash-and-grab theft. This all happened on Democrats' watch. She writes, quote, "People don't know is what's driving these failures, why California's leaders have allowed them to spiral, and how this contagion could spread to every other city and town in the United States if it isn't exposed for what it is, failed far-left social experimentation." With us now is Susan Crabtree. She and journalist Jedd McFatter co-authored this book, Fool's Gold, being released tomorrow. Welcome, Susan.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So it sounds like you really let the Democratic Party have it for its failed governance in the Golden State. Tell us more about the thesis of your book.
Well, the whole thesis is basically that California has become a dystopia, and the middle class California dream is no longer. It is now a fool's errand to pursue that dream unless you are a moneyed elite, just like Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris. They all have so many ties. And we also go into each other, and we also go into the CCP, the Newsoms selling out California to the Chinese communist government, and how all of the gory details of how that played out.
So what would you point to as the largest crisis California is facing right now? Is it the high cost of buying homes? Is it actually the drug-related crime issues? What is the main thing chasing people who are leaving California? Why are they leaving?
We have the highest costs of almost everything, from utilities to gas to housing, everything, and we're not getting the benefits of safety. And I really believe that the crime issue is one of the biggest things that are driving people away. And from our book, we point out, we uncover the fact that Gavin Newsom, during the COVID pandemic, he released 70,000 prisoners, some of them violent, back onto the streets. His excuse was because they were safer. There was going to be a COVID epidemic in the prisons, but they were safer out in the communities. We found out that was a complete fabrication. The COVID rates were higher in the communities than they were in the prisons. We talked to whistleblowers about this. So yes, again, all of what Gavin Newsom is performative, not performance-based. And that's why he thinks he can run for president via podcast while his state is still in shambles.
So, Susan, we hear this view, particularly from conservatives, quite a lot about how Democrats have ruined California and made it a dystopia, in your judgment. Last November, Kamala Harris carried the state by 20 points. Newsom, after the pandemic in 2022, won re-election by 19 points. So if the Democratic Party is the problem, why do Californians not agree?
Because it's a one-party state now.
Republicans can run, can they not?
What? They can run.
And they lose, generally, do they not?
Absolutely. The independents are growing, and Donald Trump made inroads. So he had actually 6 million to Kamala Harris's 9 million, which was like 2 million greater than last time around. So there's some trends that it's turning right. There's a rightward trend across the state. And you see in Los Angeles and San Francisco, they both kicked out their lenient on crime prosecutors, and they passed a big crackdown on crime, getting rid of some of Gavin Newsom's policies and George Gascon, the LA prosecutors' policies that were so soft on crime that it led to all these smash and grab robberies across the states. So we do see a trend. There's a chance. It'll depend on who runs for governor. And we know Kamala Harris is already in the running and she's leading the polls. But we need a breakout candidate, a Republican candidate, to really challenge her and make sure that she's being held, her feet are being held to the fire. And we already hear some rumblings that Rick Grinnell might be one of those, and a very very popular sheriff in Riverside County named Bianco is also going to be running.
What do you make of Gavin Newsom seeming to pivot recently to the right? Just talking with Charlie Kirk, trying to make common cause with Charlie Kirk, a very popular conservative commentator, saying that he agrees with the not even the conservative view, the majority view on trans women competing in women's sports. Does he have some kind of perception that he should come off as more moderate or something like that? And has it showed up in any of his policies?
It absolutely has not showed up in any of his policies. That's the perfect question. He's basically performative. He's not, he likes to say things that sound good, but when you look at his policies, had Representative Ro Khanna asking him yesterday on Fox News, so what are you changing about this 2013 law that allows trans athletes, biological men, to participate in women's sports and girls' sports in high school? And I wrote a piece last week that his wife, Jennifer Newsom, she was participating and partnering with a pro-trans athletes in high school sports group, nonprofit, just late last month. So I asked his office if there was any change whatsoever in his policies, and they just pointed to his comments with Charlie Kirk on his podcast. They had nothing new to add.
Susan, in terms of the broader case that you're making, it is quite commonplace to say the faults that exist in California are an indictment of Democratic leadership, which I think is your point. And I know this is a big topic to get into as an almost final question, but it seems to me that argument is made almost exclusively about Democratic-run states. And I was looking at the state rankings for states. U.S. News and World Report happens to do one ranking. And the state of Mississippi is 50th in the economy, 50th in health, 48th in infrastructure, 35th in education. Why is that never cited as an indictment of Republican rule, but California is cited as an indictment of Democratic rule?
Well, that's an interesting concept. You don't have a lot of people, you don't have a mass exodus from last time I checked out of Mississippi. You have so many people leaving. During Gavin Newsom, this is the first time that you've had such an exodus out of the state. And it
but my point, hold on, you can't just measure a state's performance purely on the basis of population flows. There are things like quality of life. There are things like educational standards and health standards. My point is, when there are Republican-led states that have obviously enormous problems, why is that never held as an indictment of Republican policy?
I am taking a look at California. So my belief system is that you have to
take a look at the Democratic Party from a critical perspective, no?
I am looking at California, so I am looking at my state. I actually live here, and it has been a transformation since I grew up in the 80s and 90s here. And it is what I feel like is we have so many poor standards when it comes to education as well. So we are, there's not a lot of things except for we do have a good economy. Gavin Newsom likes to say that, but what we do have record, especially during the pandemic, we had record unemployment here as well. So I think you're making a good point, but that's not something that we took a look at in this book. We're looking at what is happening with California and why are the policies being exported across the country. And why does Gavin Newsom think that he can run when he spent $24 billion on homelessness? He can't account for it, and it's getting worse.
Right. The trajectory of California's fate being, I think, what you're paying some attention to from a place where so many wealthy and bright people chose to live, and whether that will continue to be the case. Susan Crabtree, sounds like a fascinating book. Look forward to reading it. Thank you so much for coming on Rising.
Appreciate it, Robbie. Thanks for having me.